lecture about the definition and nature of translation. In this lecture, we will survey some selected definitions of the process and that of the process of translation that can be helpful, or we hope that they will be helpful for you to understand this process. Translation is the communication of the meaning of a source language text by means of an equivalent target language text. This definition is presented by the Oxford Companion to the English Language by Naeem Pahitia. This process and this definition suggests that the process of translation aims to communicate the meaning from one language to another language, which aims to convey the original tone and intent of a message, taking into account, this is a very important aspect, the translator should pay attention to the cultural and regional differences between source and target language. The student should pay attention that source language and the target language. The source language is the language that we are translating from, while the target language is the language that we are translated to. Bill offers another definition, which is translation is the expression in another language or target language of what has been expressed in another, which means source language. But you have to pay attention that the translator should preserve semantic and stylistic equivalences. He defines the translation also, this is another definition, as the replacement of a representation of a text in one language by a representation of an equivalent text in a second language. This is a very important aspect. According to Adriana Tissini, translation is the act of moving a written text from one language to another. On the other hand, she says that translation is a very difficult task. This is important. When somebody asks you whether translation is easy or difficult, your answer should be difficult, because the translator, as we will study later, should have many properties, and the translation process should take into account many dimensions such as cultural and regional differences. As any language student knows to his or her dismay, words, phrases, idioms, and expressions are all important when you move or when you transfer one text from one language to another language. At the most basic level, there are pitfalls or false cognates or false friends, reversed word order, pictograms, alphabets, and so forth. In the end, a translation is not really about words. It is all about communicating meaning. So, the process of translation is not about just transferring or translating words from one language to another language. No, it is about transferring the meaning of the first language or source language into the second language, which is a very complicated task that this will be added to this difficult task. Indeed, and when more than one language gets involved, the task grows exponentially harder. It will be more harder, often resulted in the true Tower of Babel. Jeremy Monday states that the English term translation, this is the etymology of translation, where the word translation comes from. It is attested around 1300 or 1340, derives from either from Old French translation or more directly from Latin translation. So, the word translation comes from the Latin translation, which means transporting, itself coming from the practical of the verb transferre, which means to carry over. In the field of languages, translation today has several meanings. There are different meanings for the process of translation, which means when somebody asks anybody in the street or in college or in academic, what is the meaning of translation? The first meaning is the general subject field or phenomena, such as he might answer you, I studied translation at university. Or it is about the product, is that the text that has been translated, when you say they publish the Arabic translation of the report, or the process of producing the translation. So you have general subject, you have a product, and you have a process. the process known as translation services. The English language draws, this is important. You have to differentiate between the terminology distinction between translating and interpreting. Translation is a written text, while interpreting is oral or signed communication between users of different languages. Under this distinction, translation can begin only after the appearance of writing within language community. So the student should be familiar with the terminological term of translating and interpreting. Interpreting. A translator always risks inadvertently introducing source language words or grammar or syntax into the target language rendering. On the other hand, such spillovers have sometimes imported useful source language calyx or loanwords. We will study in details what do we mean by calyx or loanwords that have enriched the target language. Translators, including early translators of sacred text, have helped shape the very language into which they have been translated. Because of the laboriousness of the translation process since the 1940s, efforts have been made, with varying degrees of success, to automate translation or to mechanically aid the human translators. As we should see today, that there are many applications, apps, or machine translations by computer or the internet. These efforts started in the 1940s, in this decade till now, and it is still a progressing process. More recently, the rise of the internet has fostered a wide world market for translation services and has facilitated language localization. We know, as you know, as students, when the teacher or the professor asks you to translate this text, the first thing students do, most of them, if not of all of them, they will go to the internet directly to translate these texts and then modify them, which means that this machine translation has helped them to translate